The Man Who Left. No Footprints. A Walter Hayes. Mystery rain had a way of changing Greyford. In daylight, it was just another quiet American town. Old brick buildings, tired shop signs, a courthouse with white columns, and a diner where the coffee was always too strong and somehow never strong enough. But at night, when the rain came down hard, Greyford felt different. The streets turned black and glossy. The lamps blurred into yellow halos. The river behind the mill rose in the dark, and all the things the town had buried seemed to move a little closer to the surface. Walter Hayes knew that feeling. He was 69 now, retired from homicide, though retirement had never sat comfortably on him. He no longer carried a badge, but he still noticed things. Small things, wrong things, details people walked past because they were too tired, too afraid, or too eager for a simple answer. That morning, the rain had not stopped. It tapped softly against Walter's kitchen window while he stood with a cup of black coffee in one hand. His old dog, June, slept on the rug near the stove. Then a patrol car pulled up outside. Walter saw Deputy Mason Reed step onto the porch, his rain jacket dark at the shoulders and mud on his boots. Mason knocked twice. Walter opened the door before the third. "Morning, Walter," Mason said. Walter looked past him at the patrol car. "Doesn't look like a social call." "No, sir." "Where?" "Old Mercer Road, near the abandoned bus stop." Walter said nothing for a moment. Most people in Greyford had forgotten that bus stop. It sat 4 miles outside town, where Route 6 used to bend through the trees before the county shut it down. A wooden shelter with a rusted roof. A place that looked like it had been waiting for someone who never came. "What happened?" Walter asked. "Body found around 6:30. Male, older. No identification yet." Walter reached for his coat. Mason hesitated. "There's something strange." Walter looked at him. Mason lowered his voice. "The ground's soft from all the rain, mud everywhere, but around the body." He stopped. Walter waited. "There aren't any footprints." Old Mercer Road had not been maintained in years. The pavement was cracked. Grass grew through the middle. The forest leaned in close on both sides, wet and dark, like it was trying to swallow the road back into the earth. By the time Walter and Mason arrived, 2 patrol cars were already parked near the bus stop. Sheriff Ellen Brody stood beside the wooden shelter, with her hat pulled low against the rain. She had the kind of face that did not waste emotion, but Walter could see the irritation in her eyes when she noticed him. "I didn't call you," Brody said. "No," Walter said. "Mason did." Mason suddenly looked very interested in the tree line. Brody sighed. "You're here now. Try not to make my day harder." "I'll do my best." The body lay about 12 feet from the bus stop, near the edge of the old road. An elderly man, thin, white hair, brown coat, dark trousers, one shoe slightly untied. He was lying on his side, one arm under him, the other bent close to his chest. Walter did not go straight to him. He looked at the ground first. Mud, wet leaves, puddles, soft earth, the kind of ground that should remember everything. But Mason had been right. There were no footprints around the body. There were tire marks farther back, almost washed away by the rain. There were tracks from the deputies, but those stopped at the boundary Brody had clearly ordered them not to cross. Around the dead man himself, the mud was smooth. Too smooth. Walter crouched carefully. The man's coat was wet across the front, soaked at the sleeves and shoulders, but his back was only damp. That mattered. If he had been lying there all night, the rain would have soaked him evenly. Walter looked at Brody. He wasn't here when the worst of the rain fell. Brody's face tightened. So someone placed him here later. Walter nodded. And did it without leaving footprints? Not without leaving them, Walter said. Without letting them remain. Mason held up an evidence bag. We found this in his hand. Inside was an old yellow bus ticket, faded, soft at the edges, torn on one side. There was no clear writing left on most of it, but one thing was still visible. Route 6, Greyford to North Emery. One way. Walter stared at it. Route 6 had not run in 20 years, not since the night Lydia Crane disappeared. There were cases every town remembered because of what happened, and there were cases a town remembered because it chose not to talk about them. Lydia Crane was the second kind. She had been 23 years old, worked at the pharmacy, lived with her mother on Bell Street. Quiet girl, people said. Sweet girl, people said. On the night she disappeared, rain had flooded half the county roads. Lydia boarded the late Route 6 bus toward North Emery. At least, that was what the driver claimed. The bus reached North Emery with 6 passengers. Lydia was not one of them. No one saw her get off. No one saw anyone hurt her. No body was found. A week later, the county shut Route 6 down, officially because of budget cuts. Unofficially, nobody in Greyford wanted to ride that bus anymore. And now, 20 years later, a dead man had appeared beside one of its old stops with a Route 6 ticket in his hand. Walter had never trusted impossible things. Most of the time, impossible just meant someone had done something simple and counted on everyone else being scared. The medical examiner arrived just before 8. Dr. Miriam Vale examined the body in the rain with the calm irritation of someone who preferred facts to weather. After several minutes, she stood and removed her gloves. Preliminary? Brody asked. Trauma to the back of the head, Dr. Vale said. Could be a fall. Could be a blow. I'll know more after the examination. Time of death? Sometime after midnight, before dawn. The weather makes it difficult. Walter nodded toward the coat. He wasn't lying here the whole time. Dr. Vale looked down, then back at him. No, she said. I agree. Brody looked at the smooth mud. Then we have a staged scene. Walter held the evidence bag up again, watching the old ticket catch the gray light. Yes, he said, and someone wanted us to look backward. They identified the dead man just after 10. His name was Samuel Pike, 76 years old, widower, no children, former mechanic for Greyford Transit before the company closed. That explained the black grease under his fingernails. Walter and Brody went to Samuel's house on Kenner Street. It was small, narrow, and old. The porch paint was peeling. Coffee cans filled with screws and bolts sat near the steps. Inside, the place smelled faintly of dust, motor oil, and peppermint. Nothing looked disturbed. No broken glass, no overturned chair, no sign that Samuel had fought anyone there. In the hallway, Walter stopped at a framed photograph. 4 men stood outside the old Greyford depot. One was Samuel Pike, younger and heavier. One was Ray Dobbs, the Route 6 driver from the night Lydia vanished. The third man had a wide smile. The fourth stood apart from the others, hands in his pockets, looking as if he did not want to be photographed. Brody stepped beside Walter. "Old transit crew," she said. Walter nodded toward the fourth man. "Who's that?" "Arthur Bell." Walter looked at her. "Bell." Brody nodded. "Owned land around the depot. Sat on the county transportation board. His son is Councilman Daniel Bell." Every town had families like the Bells. Old money, old names, old favors. In Greyford, the Bell name was carved into buildings and spoken carefully in public rooms. Walter kept looking at the photograph. "Where are they now?" "Ray Dobbs died 12 years ago. Samuel's dead. Arthur Bell is alive, barely. Lives at Bell House with a private nurse." "And the smiling one?" "Tommy Voss, dispatch. Moved away years ago." In Samuel's bedroom, they found a locked metal box under the bed. Inside were tax records, photographs, old letters, and a stack of faded Route 6 tickets tied with string. All from the year Lydia Crane disappeared. At the bottom was an envelope. Inside was a newspaper clipping. "Lydia Crane still missing after Route 6. Disappearance on the back, written in blue ink, were 4 words. I should have spoken. Brody read it twice. Mason, standing in the doorway, whispered, "Spoken about what?" Walter did not answer. He was looking at the stack of tickets. One was missing. The ticket Samuel Pike had been holding when he died. By noon, the rain had softened into mist. Walter and Brody sat in Marlene's diner with the old Lydia Crane case file spread between 2 cups of coffee. Mason stood by the counter, pretending not to listen. Marlene herself came over with a fresh pot. She was 71, sharp-eyed, and had once told Walter that small towns did not have secrets, only stories people agreed not to finish. Walter looked up at her. "You remember Lydia Crane?" The diner seemed to get quieter. Marlene poured coffee slowly. "Everybody remembers Lydia." "That's not what I asked." She met his eyes. "Yes," she said. "I remember her." "What do you remember that isn't in the file?" Marlene set the pot down. "She was leaving." Brody looked up. "Leaving Greyford?" Marlene nodded. She had money saved, a job lined up in North Emery. She wanted to take her mother with her once she got settled. Walter waited. Marlene lowered her voice. "And she was scared." "Of who?" Marlene's eyes moved toward the courthouse window, though the person she was thinking about was not there. She had been seeing Daniel Bell. Brody frowned. "That was never in the file." "No," Marlene said. "I told Sheriff Harlan back then." Walter knew the name. Harlan had been sheriff before Brody, a big man with a soft voice and a long history of letting powerful people stay comfortable. "What did Harlan do?" Walter asked. Marlene gave a bitter smile. "He told me grief makes people invent stories." Walter looked down at the file. The passengers on Route 6 that night were listed clearly. Margaret Elms, Robert Vale, Elaine Porter, Henry Sutter, and 2 names that had been protected at the time because they were minors. Daniel Bell, Michael Bell. Daniel had been 17, Michael 15. Walter closed the file. Why were the Bell boys on a late bus during a storm? Brody leaned back. That's exactly the question nobody asked hard enough. That afternoon, Walter went to Bell House. The mansion sat on a hill north of town, behind black iron fencing and old oak trees. It was large, white, and tired-looking, built by men who wanted everyone else to look up when they passed. Councilman Daniel Bell met Walter in the entry hall. He was 57 now, polished and controlled, with a kind of smile that had been practiced in mirrors. "Mr. Hayes," Daniel said, "I heard about Samuel Pike. Terrible thing. Most death is." Daniel's smile faded slightly. "My father is resting. He's very ill. I'm here about Samuel." "I thought Sheriff Brody was handling that." "She is." "Then why are you here?" Walter looked around the sitting room. Old portraits, heavy furniture, books no one seemed to read. Samuel Pike was found this morning with an old Route 6 ticket in his hand. Daniel's face remained still, but his right hand tightened against the arm of his chair. Walter noticed. "You were on Route 6 the night Lydia Crane disappeared," Walter said. Daniel looked toward the window. "I was a teenager. Yes. That was 20 years ago. Also yes. I answered questions back then. Not all of them." Daniel stood. "This conversation is over." Walter rose slowly. "You and Lydia were seeing each other." Daniel's face hardened. "I said it's over." Walter walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned back. "People think silence protects the past," he said. "It doesn't. It only gives the past time to prepare." Daniel did not answer, but as Walter stepped outside, he saw a curtain move in an upstairs window. An old man's face watched him from behind the glass. Arthur Bell was alive, and perhaps not as unaware as his son wanted people to think. The next important witness was Henry Sutter. He lived now in a nursing home on the east side of town. He had been one of the passengers on Route 6 the night Lydia vanished. Henry was 83, thin, pale, and wrapped in a blanket near the window when Walter arrived. For a while, neither man spoke. Walter had learned not to hurry old memories. They did not come when ordered. They came when they trusted the room. At last, Henry said, "You're here about Lydia." Walter nodded. Henry looked through the rain-speckled glass. "Samuel Pike came to see me last week." Walter leaned slightly forward. "What did he want?" "To ask if I remembered." "Remembered what?" Henry closed his eyes. "The bus stopped twice." Walter stayed still. In the report, Ray Dobbs said Lydia got off near Mercer Road, but before that, the bus stopped at the old maintenance shed. "The depot shed?" Henry nodded. "Ray said there was engine trouble. Samuel was there. He came out in a raincoat. Talked to Ray. We sat there maybe 10 minutes. Was Lydia still on the bus?" "Yes." "And after the shed?" Henry swallowed. "She wasn't." Walter's voice stayed soft. "Did you see her get off?" "No. That's what I never understood. I didn't see her leave. One minute she was near the back. Next minute, her seat was empty. Did anyone else get off?" Henry opened his eyes. "Daniel Bell." Walter did not move. "Are you sure?" "I remember because he came back wet, mud on his sleeve. His brother Michael was crying. Ray told everyone to mind their own business." Henry's hands trembled. "I was afraid. Arthur Bell owned half the town back then. Sheriff Harlan drank with him on Fridays. I told myself the girl must have run off. I told myself a lot of things." "Why did Samuel come now?" Walter asked. Henry looked tired. He said Arthur Bell was dying. Said once Arthur died, Daniel would sell the old depot land. Said they'd dig it all up. Walter's eyes narrowed. Dig what up? Henry looked at him. He didn't say, but I think Samuel knew. By sunset, Brody had a warrant for the old Greyford depot. The building had been closed for nearly 20 years. Boarded windows, rusted gates, a chain-link fence sagging around the property. Behind it stood the maintenance shed where Route 6 had stopped the night Lydia vanished. The yard was soaked and muddy. Mason found fresh footprints near the shed door. 2 sets, one heavy, uneven, one narrower, with a broken tread on the right heel. Inside, the maintenance shed smelled of rust, wet concrete, and old oil. A stripped bus frame sat in the dark. Tools still hung from the walls. Rain dripped through holes in the roof. Brody found a fresh scrape near the workbench. Something heavy had been dragged. Walter found the patch in the concrete. It was near the back wall, partly hidden behind rotting wooden pallets. A square of concrete, older than recent work, but not original. Walter stood over it. Brody came beside him. You think Lydia's under there? Walter looked at the patch for a long moment. I think Samuel did. The county crew broke through the concrete the next morning. Beneath it, under packed dirt and lime, they found human remains. Near the wrist was a small silver bracelet. Lydia Crane's mother identified it from a photograph. She had given it to Lydia on her 21st birthday. For 20 years, Greyford had carried a missing girl. Now it had a murdered one. Daniel Bell was brought in that afternoon. Walter watched from behind the glass as Brody questioned him. Daniel denied everything. He denied hurting Lydia, denied knowing about the maintenance shed, denied seeing Samuel Pike before his death, denied being near Old Mercer Road. Then Brody placed photographs of the depot footprints on the table, the broken tread on the right heel. Daniel's face did not change, but his lawyer looked down at Daniel's shoes. A search warrant for Daniel's house found muddy boots in the garage. The right heel matched. The mud matched the depot yard. Mason thought that was it. Brody almost did too, but Walter did not. He sat in Brody's office that evening, reading Samuel Pike's autopsy report. Mason leaned against the wall. You don't look satisfied, Mason said. Walter turned a page. Because the answer is sitting too neatly. Brody looked up. What's wrong? Samuel was struck from behind, Walter said. No defensive wounds. That means he either trusted the person or never saw them coming. Daniel could have done that, Mason said. He could have. Walter tapped another page. But Samuel had red clay in the soles of his shoes. The depot yard is dark mud and ash. Old Mercer Road is black mud. Red clay comes from the East Ridge. Brody's expression changed. Bell House. Walter nodded. Samuel went there before he died. Mason frowned. Daniel said he hadn't seen Samuel. Daniel says many things. Walter picked up the photo of the bus ticket. And the ticket bothers me. Brody leaned forward. Why? It wasn't soaked. His hand was wet. His coat was wet. But the ink on the ticket was only lightly blurred. That means it was placed in his hand after most of the rain had passed. Mason stared at him. So the killer staged the body after the storm. Yes. Why leave him at the bus stop? Brody answered quietly. To point us back to Lydia. Walter nodded. Someone wanted us to find the old crime. Mason looked toward the interview room where Daniel still sat with his lawyer. Then Daniel didn't kill Samuel? Walter looked at him. Daniel is guilty of something, but I don't think Samuel's death belongs to him. They returned to Bell House that night. Arthur Bell lay upstairs in a large bed beneath heavy blankets, his skin pale and thin under the warm light of a bedside lamp. Daniel was there, angry and frightened. A private nurse stood near the bed. Her name was Clara Dobbs. Walter noticed the name before he noticed anything else. Dobbs. Ray Dobbs had been the driver of Route 6. Clara kept her hands folded in front of her. There was red clay under one thumbnail. Walter looked from her hand to Arthur Bell, then back again. Samuel Pike came here, Walter said. Daniel stepped forward. My father is dying. This is harassment. Brody lifted a hand. Stay where you are, Councilman. Walter placed the old transit crew photograph on Arthur's blanket. You, Ray Dobbs, Tommy Voss, Samuel Pike, Walter said softly. 4 men who knew what happened to Lydia Crane. Arthur's eyes moved. Barely. But they moved. Walter continued. Lydia was seeing your son. She was pregnant, wasn't she? Daniel went pale. The nurse looked down. Walter saw it. There are moments when a case turns, not because someone speaks, but because someone stops pretending to breathe normally. Walter turned toward Clara Dobbs. How long have you worked here? 3 months, she said. And why did you take this job? She did not answer. Walter's voice stayed calm. Your father drove Route 6 the night Lydia vanished. Clara closed her eyes. Daniel looked at her, confused. Brody stepped closer. Clara? The nurse sat slowly in the chair beside Arthur Bell's bed. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she began. Her father, Ray Dobbs, had not truly survived the night Lydia disappeared. His heart stopped 12 years later, yes, but Clara said the guilt had been killing him long before that. When she was young, she heard him crying in the garage at night. He drank. He woke from nightmares. He kept an old Route 6 ticket in his wallet until the day he died. He never told her the full story. Only one sentence. We left her there. Years later, Clara became a nurse. When she saw that Arthur Bell needed private care, she applied for the job. She wanted to know. At first, Arthur said nothing. Then illness and medication loosened his memory. He began confusing Clara with people from the past. Once, he called her Lydia. Another night, he called her Ray. Then he told the story. Lydia Crane had been pregnant. Daniel Bell was the father. Arthur Bell wanted the problem handled quietly. He did not call it murder. Men like him rarely used honest words when dishonest ones could protect them. The plan was to frighten Lydia, to make her leave Greyford, to make sure she never embarrassed the Bell family. Ray Dobbs stopped the bus at the maintenance shed. Samuel Pike was waiting there because Arthur had ordered him to unlock the building. Daniel took Lydia inside. Michael followed and panicked. There was an argument. Lydia tried to leave. Daniel grabbed her. She fell and struck her head on the concrete edge of the service pit. Maybe she died instantly. Maybe she did not. Arthur arrived later in the storm and made the decision that buried the truth for 20 years. No ambulance, no police, no confession. They buried Lydia beneath the shed floor before dawn. Ray drove the bus to North Emery. Samuel poured the concrete patch 2 days later. and Greyford learned to look away. Clara found Samuel Pike after Arthur's confession. She went to him and begged him to tell Sheriff Brody. Samuel broke. He admitted everything. He said he had kept the old tickets because he could not let the night disappear completely. He promised Clara he would speak, but then he changed his mind, not to protect Daniel, to protect himself. He was old, frightened, and ashamed. He told Clara that Lydia was already gone. He said digging up the past would only destroy the living. 2 nights later, Samuel came to Bell House to confront Arthur. Clara followed him after he left through the rear of the house. She found him in the old carriage house. She said she only wanted him to do the right thing. Samuel told her no. After 20 years, still no. There was an old iron wrench on the workbench. Clara picked it up. 1 blow. Samuel fell. She stood there listening to the rain on the roof. Then she remembered the old Route 6 ticket her father had kept. She drove Samuel's body to Old Mercer Road after the worst of the rain had passed. She used a canvas tarp to drag him from the car. She stayed on the cracked pavement and wet grass where the rain would hide her path. She placed him near the bus stop. She put the ticket in his hand. She wanted someone to understand. She wanted the town to look. When Clara finished, the room was silent. Daniel Bell looked hollow, as if something inside him had finally collapsed. Arthur Bell stared at the ceiling, 1 tear sliding slowly into his white hair. Brody arrested Clara herself. At the bedroom door, Clara stopped and looked back at Walter. "Did I do wrong?" she asked. Walter did not answer quickly. Outside the window, rain moved across the glass in thin silver lines. Finally, he said, "Yes." Clara closed her eyes. Then Walter added, "But you weren't the first." 2 funerals were held in Greyford that week. Samuel Pike's was small, a few neighbors, Marlene, Sheriff Brody, Mason Reed standing in the back with his hat in his hands. The pastor spoke about mercy. Walter wondered how often people used that word when justice had arrived too late. Lydia Crane's service came 3 days later. Her mother sat in the front row, holding the silver bracelet in both hands. The coffin was closed. The church was full. People cried who had not spoken Lydia's name in years. Daniel Bell would face charges for what happened that night. Arthur Bell died before trial. Some people called that mercy. Walter did not. Clara Dobbs confessed fully. Her lawyer would argue grief, trauma, and provocation. Maybe it would matter. Maybe it would not. The truth had come out. But truth did not give Lydia 20 years back. It did not make a young woman grow old. It did not give her mother all the mornings she had lost waiting by the window. After the service, Walter drove alone to Old Mercer Road. The abandoned bus stop still stood beside the wet road, leaning slightly to one side. Rainwater dripped from the rusted roof. The old route sign was nearly unreadable. Route 6, Greyford to North Emery. One way. Walter stood there as dusk settled over the trees. For 20 years, people had driven past this road and seen nothing. But nothing was rarely empty. Nothing had weight. Nothing had names. Nothing had mothers who waited. Mechanics who kept old tickets. Bus drivers who cried in garages. Sons who inherited silence like property. Walter looked down at the mud. This time, there were footprints everywhere. Deputies, reporters, county workers, curious townspeople who had come after the truth broke open. Maybe that was how it always happened. For years, no one stepped close enough. Then, When it was too late, everyone wanted to stand where the dead had been. Walter turned back toward his car. June would be waiting at home. There would be coffee in the kitchen. The house would be quiet. Tomorrow, Greyford would begin the slow work of pretending it had changed. But Walter knew better. Towns did not change because a secret came out. They changed when people stopped calling silence peace. As he opened the car door, the wind moved through the trees behind him. For a second, it sounded almost like an old bus pulling away in the rain. Walter looked back. The road was empty. No headlights, no engine, no passengers. Only the wet black pavement stretching into the dusk, and the old shelter waiting for someone who would never have to wait again. And for the first time in 20 years, the road to North Emery felt still. Not forgotten, not forgiven, but still.